weapon. But be warned, this is not for the fragile. We are going to destroy the victim mentality you've been carrying. We are going to look into the mirror, and you might be scared of what stares back. Trait 1. Hyper-acute pattern recognition. Most people sleepwalk through their interactions. They listen to words. I love you. I support you. We're friends. They take these words at face value because it is comfortable. It is easy. You don't. You can't. If you have no friends, it is likely because you suffer from, or are gifted with, hyper-acute pattern recognition. Your brain does not listen to what people say. It analyzes what they do. It tracks micro-expressions, tonal shifts, and timing delays. Psychologists call this thin slicing, the ability to find patterns in events based only on narrow windows of experience. When someone compliments you, but their eyes don't crinkle at the corners, you see the envy. When someone agrees with you, but their voice pitch rises slightly, you hear the deception. You see the shadow behind the mask. For the average person, a social gathering is a fun exchange of energy. For you, it is a deafening, chaotic stream of data. You are watching people pretend. You are watching them suppress their true nature to fit into the social hierarchy. And because you see the performance, you cannot participate in it. It feels like acting in a play where everyone knows the lines, but you. Or worse, you know the lines, but you refuse to say them because they are lies. This makes you dangerous to be around. People who live in denial hate those who see the truth. When you are in a group, you often stay silent, not because you are shy, but because you are observing, and people feel your observation. It makes them uneasy. They sense that you see through their persona. They will call you judgy. They will call you intense. They will call you hard to read. What they really mean is, you are a mirror, and I don't like my reflection. If you have lost friends, ask yourself, did you lose them, or did you expose them? Did they leave because you were toxic, or did they flee because you were the only one who didn't buy their act? Your solitude is the price you pay for your clarity. You have an allergic reaction to fake behavior. While others can swallow the poison of inauthenticity and smile, your system rejects it immediately. You aren't lonely. You are just incapable of being lied to. Trait 2. Intolerance for social entropy. There is a law in physics called entropy. Systems tend toward disorder, toward randomness, toward noise. Most social interaction is entropy. It is noise. How about this weather? Did you see that game? I hate my boss. It is the recycling of dead information. If you have few friends, it is because you possess a rare trait known as high need for cognition. This isn't just about being smart. It is a biological drive. Research in personality psychology shows that individuals with high openness and high intellect physically suffer when forced to engage in shallow interaction. It drains your dopamine. It spikes your cortisol. Small talk to you is not polite. It is theft. It is the theft of your time. Look at this diagram. Most of the world operates at the bottom. Survival, safety, belonging. Their conversations reflect this. They talk about people. They talk about events. You operate at the top. Self-actualization, transcendence. You want to talk about ideas. You want to talk about the future. You want to decode the universe. When you try to bring these topics up at a dinner party, what happens? Silence. Awkward stares. Someone laughs nervously and changes the subject back to something safe. You are viewed as too heavy, too serious. So you have a choice. You can lobotomize yourself, dumb yourself down, pretend to care about the celebrity gossip, pretend to be excited about the mundane, just to have friends. Or you can stay silent. Most people choose the lobotomy. They would rather be surrounded by fools than stand alone with their own thoughts. You chose the silence. This is not arrogance. This is energy economics. You realized long ago that you have a finite amount of mental energy. Spending it on social entropy feels like burning money. You crave the deep dive. You want the 3 a.m. conversation about the nature of consciousness, the strategy of war, the meaning of death. And because 99% of people are terrified of those depths, 99% of people cannot be your friend. You are a deep sea diver in a world of wading pools. Do not apologize for your depth. The ocean does not apologize for being deep just because the swimmer is afraid of the bottom. Trait 3. The autoimmune response to control. Let's go darker. There is a trait that is often diagnosed as oppositional defiant disorder in children, but in adults, if channeled correctly, it is the trait of the genius. It is the refusal to submit to arbitrary authority. Most friendship circles are not democracies. They are tyrannies. They are micro-cults. They have unwritten rules. We hate this person, so you must hate them too. We believe this political view, so you must believe it too. We are going out tonight, so you must come too. This is the herd instinct, the biological urge to conform to stay safe. The Ash conformity experiments proved that 75% of people will agree with an obvious lie just to fit in with the group. If the group says the short line is the long line, the individual will agree. You are in the 25%. You are the glitch in the matrix. When a social circle demands your compliance, your brain triggers a threat response. You don't feel safe in the herd. You feel suffocated. You have a high degree of autonomy. You cannot respect a person just because they are popular. You cannot agree with an idea just because it is trending. You require logic. You require proof. This makes you a bad friend to narcissists. Narcissists collect friends like accessories. They want entourage members who nod and clap. You don't nod. You ask, why? And why is the most dangerous word you can speak to a fragile ego. Because you cannot be controlled, you are often cast out. Groups will label you difficult or arrogant. They will try to exile you to break you. They hope that the pain of loneliness will force you to come crawling back, ready to obey. But this is where you confuse them. You don't crawl back. You thrive. You use the exile to build. This trait, this inability to be a sheep, is why you are alone. But it is also why you are free. While they are trapped in a web of social obligations, debt, and lies, you are walking your own path. You have traded popularity for sovereignty. And sovereignty is a lonely kingdom, but it is the only one worth ruling. But it is the only one worth ruling. Trait 4. The architect's obsession. Let's talk about resources. Most people treat their lives like a waiting room. They are waiting for the weekend, waiting for the vacation, waiting for retirement. They use friends to kill time. You feel the passing of time like a physical wound. You are not here to wait. You are here to build. Whether it is a business, a body of art, a philosophy, or your own physique, you are possessed by a vision of what you could become. This is the architect trait. And here is the brutal truth about building something great. It requires a monomaniacal focus. Neuroscience shows us that the brain has two primary modes. The default mode network, socializing, daydreaming, past/future thinking, and the task positive network, deep focus, flow state, execution. They are anti-correlated. When one is on, the other is off. You cannot build an empire and maintain a thriving social life simultaneously. You just can't. History is filled with outliers who had few friends. Tesla, Michelangelo, Newton. They weren't crying about it. They were too busy decoding the laws of the universe. You have likely realized that every hour you spend in a bar listening to someone complain about their ex is an hour you stole from your future self. So you started saying no to the drinks, no to the parties, no to the hanging out. And when you say no enough times, the invitations stop coming. Good. This is the filtration system working. You are clearing the construction site. You are putting up the do not disturb sign on your life. People take this personally. They think you are better than them. You don't think you are better. You just know you have work to do. You are playing a zero-sum game with your attention. If you have no friends, it might be because you are currently in a metamorphosis phase. The caterpillar dissolves completely inside the cocoon. It has no friends in there. It has no social life. It is total destruction and reconstruction. If you are in that phase, solitude is not a burden. It is a biological necessity. Do not let the world drag you out of your cocoon before you have your wings. They will crush you. Stay in the dark. Do the work. The friends you lose during your building phase were never going to fit in your skyscraper anyway. Pause. Take a breath. I can feel your resistance. There is a voice in your head saying, but humans are social animals. We need connection. Am I just coping? Am I just telling myself this to feel better? That is a valid question. And the answer is, yes, we need connection. But you are starving because you are looking for steak in a candy store. You don't need more connection. You need rare connection. And because you are rare, the statistical probability of you finding your match is low. That is simply math. If you are in the top 1% of intellect, ambition, or awareness, you will only resonate with 1% of the population. That means in a room of 100 people, 99 will bore you, and you will scare them. This leads us to the fifth trait, the one that explains why your very presence triggers insecurity in others. This is where it gets psychological. This is where we enter the shadow. Trait 5, the unconscious mirror. Have you ever walked into a room, said nothing, and felt people dislike you immediately? Have you ever been targeted by a bully or a manipulator for no apparent reason? It's not because you are weak, it's because you are a screen. People with high self-awareness and low social need act as a blank screen upon which others project their own demons. This is the Jungian concept of the shadow. When a person who is fake, insecure, and desperate for approval meets you, someone who is quiet, contained, and self-sufficient, they do not see you. They see the part of themselves they are ashamed of. They see their own lack of courage. Your silence makes them hear their own internal noise louder. Your independence mocks their dependency. You become a walking reminder of what they are not. And because the human ego cannot handle shame, it converts that shame into aggression. They attack you to destroy the mirror. If you have no friends, it is often because you refuse to help people harm.
One pack of Ben's Original, one pinch of chaos.
Domino Intensify. Night.
There's a moment most men don't see coming, the moment her regret begins. Not when you're fighting to keep her, explaining yourself, or holding on a little longer, but after you've already let go. That's the strange truth. Her regret doesn't show up in the chaos of trying to fix things. It shows up later, in the quiet space your detachment creates when your attention stops orbiting her, and your presence no longer asks for reassurance or validation. In this video, we'll break down why her regret comes after your detachment, what shifts when you stop reaching, and why this is about calm, grounded, self-respect, not manipulation. If this resonates, like the video, subscribe to the channel, and stay with us as we walk through it step by step. Number 1. The moment you stop chasing. Her regret doesn't begin with a fight, a dramatic ending, or a clear moment of loss. It begins much earlier and much quieter at the exact moment you stop chasing clarity, reassurance, or emotional control. This is the moment most men overlook, because from the outside, nothing seems to change. There's no confrontation, no final words, no obvious shift in behavior. But internally, the entire dynamic starts to reorganize itself. When you were chasing, your energy was constantly moving outward. You wanted answers. You wanted emotional alignment. You wanted certainty about where you stood. That pursuit made you readable, predictable, adjustable. If she pulled back, you leaned forward. If she grew uncertain, you tried to stabilize the situation. Even when your intentions were sincere, your availability made the emotional structure flexible around her moods. She didn't need to wonder where you were. Your reactions told her everything. The moment you stop chasing, that outward flow of energy reverses. Not dramatically, not with anger or silence meant to punish. It simply returns to you. You stop trying to resolve ambiguity. You stop negotiating for reassurance. You allow questions to remain unanswered. And that's when something unfamiliar enters her emotional field. A pause, a loss of reference, the sense that you are no longer orienting yourself around her responses. This is where Stoic restraint quietly comes into play. Stoicism teaches that desire aimed outward weakens a man, not because desire itself is wrong, but because dependence on outcomes erodes self-command. When you withdraw pursuit without resentment, you aren't creating distance, you're creating gravity. Gravity doesn't chase, it doesn't argue, it doesn't convince. It simply exists, and others feel its pull when they move too far away. From her perspective, this shift is disorienting. Not painful yet, but noticeable. The emotional leverage she once had dissolves. Not because you took it back forcefully, but because you stopped offering it freely. She feels the absence of your pursuit long before she feels regret. And that absence plants the first seed of it. Number 2, when your absence feels different. Absence on its own isn't what unsettles her. She has experienced distance before arguments, emotional pullbacks, moments of tension where silence was charged and reactive. That kind of absence feels loud. It carries emotion. It demands resolution. Even when it's uncomfortable, it's familiar. She knows how to interpret it, and more importantly, she knows how to respond to it. But detachment creates a different kind of absence, a heavier one, when your silence isn't fueled by anger, disappointment, or the need to be understood. It doesn't echo the same way. It doesn't ask for attention. It doesn't hint at resentment. It doesn't wait for the right words to restart the conversation. It simply exists, grounded and unresolved. And that's precisely why she feels it more deeply. She senses the difference almost immediately. This isn't silence meant to provoke a reaction. It's silence that doesn't need one. There's no emotional tension leaking through it. No pressure. No signal that says, if you just say the right thing, this will soften. Instead, there's a quiet finality to it, not an ending, but a self-contained presence that no longer orbits her emotional state. Stoic detachment isn't emotional withdrawal. It's emotional self-command. You're not suppressing feelings or pretending not to care. You're simply no longer letting emotion dictate movement. You're no longer reacting in ways that make your inner world visible and adjustable. And because of that, your absence doesn't feel like a tactic. It feels like a truth. This is where her mind begins to linger, not because she's being punished, but because she can't locate you emotionally the way she used to. There's no emotional noise to interpret, no drama to resolve, no urgency to fix. And without those cues, her thoughts slow down and deepen. Anger-driven silence fades quickly once emotions settle. Detached absence doesn't. It stays present in the background of her thoughts, not demanding attention, but quietly occupying space. She notices it during unrelated moments. She wonders about it without realizing why. And slowly, that weight becomes more significant than any argument ever was. This is when absence stops being empty and starts becoming unforgettable. And this is the moment where everything quietly turns inward. Nothing needs to be decided yet. Nothing needs to be fixed or explained. The shift you've just heard about isn't loud enough to demand action, but it's strong enough to invite reflection. Take a second to notice where this resonates with your own experience, where silence changed shape instead of simply ending. If this perspective is landing for you, tap the like button so more men can find it, and leave a comment sharing what stood out, or simply type, "My calm no longer chases," to mark the moment you recognize this shift.
The volume of applicants, reach outs, hiring assistant has been invaluable. And
chases to mark the moment you recognize this shift. Number 3, you no longer seek closure. There comes a quiet point where you stop asking questions, not because you finally received satisfying answers, but because you no longer need them. You stop replaying conversations in your head. You stop looking for explanations that would make everything feel settled. You stop chasing emotional clarity as if it were a missing piece you can still retrieve. Nothing dramatic announces this shift. It happens internally, when the need to know loosens its grip on you. Before this moment, closure felt essential. You believed that understanding her reasons would bring peace, that if she could just explain herself clearly enough, you could finally relax, accept, and move on. But what actually kept you stuck wasn't the lack of answers. It was the belief that your peace depended on them. Every unanswered question kept you oriented toward her inner world instead of your own. Stoicism approaches this differently. It teaches acceptance of what lies outside your control, not as resignation, but as clarity. You begin to recognize that another person's feelings, decisions, and timing do not belong to you. And once that understanding settles in, you stop negotiating with uncertainty. You don't demand emotional resolution from someone who may not even understand herself. You allow the ambiguity to exist without trying to conquer it. This is the moment your energy truly detaches. Not because you've won or healed perfectly, but because you've reclaimed authority over where your attention goes. You stop asking why and start asking how you will live regardless. And in doing so, you remove yourself from the emotional courtroom where you were waiting for a verdict. Ironically, this is when the dynamic reverses. When you no longer seek closure, she begins to feel its absence. The conversations that never happened, the questions left unanswered, the emotional loose ends, these now sit with her instead of you. She senses that you've stopped waiting, that you're no longer standing in the doorway hoping for clarity, and that unsettles her, because closure is only powerful when someone still needs it. The moment you release the need for explanations, you become emotionally unavailable in a new way, not distant, but complete. And from that position, her curiosity awakens. She begins searching for the very clarity you no longer require. This is where regret starts to form, not from loss, but from realization. Number 4, her certainty starts to crack. Her certainty was never built on words or promises. It was built on patterns, on repetition, on knowing, without consciously thinking about it, how you would respond. When you were emotionally available, she could feel your position clearly. She knew where she stood. She knew how much space she had. She knew what would happen if she pulled back or leaned in. Your reactions filled in the blanks before any real uncertainty could form. That certainty created comfort, and comfort, while often mistaken for connection, is rooted in predictability. When your emotions were accessible and responsive, she didn't have to wonder. Your presence adjusted to her mood. Your tone shifted with hers. Even silence had a meaning she understood, because it usually led to reassurance or explanation. She wasn't guessing. You made the emotional landscape legible. Calm detachment disrupts that without creating chaos. You don't become cold. You don't withdraw dramatically. You don't change your behavior in ways that demand attention. Instead, you remain composed. Your reactions slow down. Your emotional output becomes measured rather than automatic. And for the first time, her expectations stop being consistently fed. Stoics understood this deeply. Certainty dissolves, not when conflict appears, but when expectations are no longer rewarded. When a man stops reinforcing assumptions with predictable behavior, the sense of control quietly erodes. You're still present, still respectful, still grounded, but no longer emotionally transparent on demand. This introduces a new kind of uncertainty. Not the anxious kind that comes from instability, but the reflective kind that comes from losing emotional access. She begins to notice gaps where responses used to be, pauses where reassurance once arrived, calm where emotional negotiation once lived, and those gaps invite thought. At first, it doesn't feel like regret. It feels like mild disorientation. She replays interactions. She tests the tone of conversations. She wonders not dramatically, but persistently what changed. And the unsettling part isn't that you left, it's that you didn't. You remained steady without being available in the old way. This is where regret quietly begins. Not because she suddenly fears losing you, but because the emotional certainty she relied on has vanished. She can no longer locate herself through your reactions. Number 7. You continue living fully. One of the most misunderstood aspects of detachment is the idea that it makes a man smaller, quieter, less engaged with life. In reality, the opposite happens. Detachment doesn't shrink your world, it expands it. When you stop organizing your energy around one emotional outcome, that energy doesn't disappear. It redirects, and what it flows into begins to grow. Instead of monitoring messages, interpreting tone, or waiting for emotional cues, your attention returns to what was quietly neglected. Purpose, discipline, direction. You begin filling your days with things that move you forward, rather than things that keep you emotionally paused. Work becomes more focused. Training becomes more consistent. Your routines tighten not out of obsession, but out of clarity. You're no longer living in reaction. You're living in intention. Stoicism never promoted withdrawal from life. It promoted freedom from dependency. The Stoic ideal wasn't isolation, but engagement without attachment. You still participate fully, still invest effort, still experience emotion, but you don't hinge your sense of self on how someone else responds. Your life gains momentum because it's no longer waiting for permission to move. From her perspective, this shift is unmistakable. Not because you announce it, but because it shows. Your energy feels different, lighter, self-contained. You're no longer carrying the weight of unspoken expectation. And that absence of bitterness matters more than most men realize. You didn't walk away angry. You didn't collapse into distraction. You didn't stall. You kept going. That's what deepens regret. Not the fact that you left, but the realization that you didn't stop, that her absence didn't derail you, that your life continued to expand without emotional residue dragging behind it. There's no guilt to resolve, no anger to soothe, no broken man to fix. Number 10. You become emotionally unavailable. What happens here is often misunderstood, even by men who are living it. Emotional unavailability, in this context, has nothing to do with coldness, punishment, or unresolved pain. It isn't a wall you build out of fear, and it isn't a strategy designed to provoke longing. It's something far quieter than that. You become unavailable not because you closed yourself off, but because you stopped offering access to instability. Earlier, your emotional openness was generous. You made room for uncertainty. You stayed present even when clarity was missing. You tolerated mixed signals because you believed patience would eventually create alignment. That openness wasn't weakness. It was hope. But hope, when left ungoverned, often turns into endurance of conditions that slowly drain you. Detachment doesn't harden you, it refines you. You begin to notice that your inner peace has a cost when it's exposed to chaos, and at some point, you decide that cost is no longer worth paying. Not dramatically, not with resentment, simply with awareness. You stop stepping into emotional fog. You stop responding to confusion as if it deserves your energy. You don't suppress emotion, you choose where it's allowed to land. Stoic discipline was never about denying feeling. It was about discernment, about recognizing which experiences strengthen your character and which quietly erode it. In that sense, emotional unavailability becomes an act of self-respect rather than defense. You remain open to depth, but closed to disorder. You remain capable of connection, but unwilling to negotiate your calm. What makes this boundary so powerful is that it isn't argued. There's no explanation attached to it, no justification offered, no emotional speech announcing a change. Your behavior simply shifts. You no longer lean into instability. You no longer linger where clarity is absent. And because there's no emotional charge around this decision, it doesn't invite debate. She feels it without being told. She senses that the space she once occupied effortlessly now requires coherence. That access is no longer automatic, and that realization doesn't arrive as rejection, but as finality. Not the finality of an ending, but the finality of a standard that has settled into place. This is where regret deepens, because what's no longer available isn't your affection, but the version of you who made room for uncertainty at the expense of himself.
Get a podium-worthy lineup.